In the past 20 years, Andrew Jones has been one of the more influential speaker designers in all of hi-fi, designing everything from TAD's Cost No Object speakers to the more affordable lines for Pioneer and ELAC. Jones has since moved on to MOFI Electronics with his debut series, the SourcePoint. Now it's time to find out, is the new SourcePoint 8 vintage Jones, or is it something entirely new? The SourcePoint 8 is the smaller version of the original SourcePoint 10. It's smaller, but I promise you it's not small. After all, an 8-inch concentric driver has to go somewhere, and inside rests a 1¼ soft dome tweeter. The speaker's concentric driver layout, dual rear-facing ports, and large cabinet all combined for a reported frequency response of 47 Hz to 30 kHz. Impedance is stated to be 8 ohms, though it dips down as low as 6.4 with a sensitivity of 87 dB, meaning the 8s are pretty amplifier friendly. We used everything from a Pioneer Elite 805 receiver to the Audiolab 7000A integrated with no problems. Honestly, any amplifier with 40 or more watts per channel into 8 ohms should drive the 8s just fine, with more powerful amps like the Audiolab 8300 XP or Emotiva separates having absolutely zero issues, both of which were actually my personal favorites with this particular speaker. The 8's design follows the SourcePoint 10's with one exception. The 8 comes in 3 finishes rather than the 10's 2 options. Our review pair is in the satin walnut, but you can also get a satin black ash and satin white. You get magnetic grills in either black or a light gray if you go with the satin white finish. Regardless of the colorway, this is a very sturdy and well-built speaker that may look unconventional at first, but after living with it, I have to admit, I really like it. The walnut veneer looks almost furniture grade. I happen to prefer the speaker without the grills on, but hey, that's just me. The SourcePoint 8 and I assume the 10's are not the easiest speakers to set up, so be prepared to devote some time to get them just right. If you go by the manual, it will tell you to place the speakers equal distance from each other as well as your listening position, forming an equilateral triangle. The manual also instructs you to rotate the speakers inward or toe them in so they cross just before or just behind your listening position for better imaging and focus. Now, neither of these tips are bad per se, and honestly are common instructions for a lot of speakers, and I would have followed the manual to the letter had it not been for an email from MOFI instructing us not to toe them in, but instead leave them pointed straight ahead. According to MOFI, concentric designs aren't meant to be set up on axis or pointed at the listening position. Now, this somewhat flies in the face of what's stated in the manual, which I found confusing, if not a little intriguing. Early critiques of the SourcePoint 10 have noted some brightness or greater top-end emphasis than previous Jones designs, and keeping the speakers pointed straight ahead would definitely help to curb the potential for this speaker seeming too bright. So I wondered if this email was MOFI's way of getting ahead of the situation. I played with toe-in quite a bit, and when it came to the 8s, I have to say, MOFI's smart to suggest that the speaker should remain more straight ahead rather than toed in. When directly pointed at my listening position, this speaker can sound bright. In our room, the speaker sounded best pulled out about 2 feet from our front wall, measuring from the rear of the speaker, spaced 8.5 feet apart with just a hint of toe-in towards our listening position that rested roughly 10 feet away. With the speakers finally dialed in, I did a couple of quick sweeps 20 to 20 from our listening position at a level of 75 dB. As you can see, the 8 is pretty linear from about 100 Hz on up to the treble, which should be good for clarity and detail, though I have to point out that this speaker does not appear to roll off much, if any, as you approach 20 kHz, meaning the speaker has the potential to be bright. Bass-wise, I think Jones & Company are accurate in suggesting that this speaker doesn't have much bass below the mid-40s, meaning that for full-range playback, a subwoofer or 2 is going to be required. Now, I have had a love-hate relationship with some of Jones's past designs. I was a big fan of his ultra-affordable Pioneer speakers, but I was a bit hit or miss on some of his ELAC designs. Regardless, all Jones speakers share some similarities. They are mild-mannered overall, with well-dampened bass, a mostly neutral mid-range, and treble that rarely comes across as bright, let alone fatiguing. For me, some of his previous designs have felt a bit dull, but this is not the case for the SourcePoint 8. If anything, the 8 is 3 things: Clear, detailed, and extended. Let me just get bass out of the way first, and this is going to be quick because there isn't much to report. Even with 2 rear-facing ports, the 8 is a touch lean, which is surprising given its 8-inch woofer. Nevertheless, the speaker's low end favors agility and texture over grunt and that gut-punching extension, a trait I actually appreciate. The 8's crossed over with the new KLIPSCH RP subwoofer at around 50 to 60 hertz, sounded great, and brought an added degree of dimension and scale to tracks like Romance with a Memory and True Disaster, but on its own, this is not a bass-heavy or bass-rich speaker. Now, moving the speaker closer to your wall or corner will allow them to load and sound better down low, but it could also rob the speaker of some of its mid-range detail. Speaking of the mid-range, I love it. The lack of low bass could make you believe the 8s are a little lean or cool in the mid-range, but I wouldn't classify them as such. If anything, the SourcePoint's mid-range is revealing, maybe even ruthlessly neutral. Vocals or dialogue are precise, even crispy. Female vocalists, for example, Tuvalu, whose range rests in the upper mid-range, sound especially present and front of house. The 8s have a live quality similar to KLIPSCH, only without any of the horn coloration or potential for megaphone-like effect. I just gotta say, this is one hell of a focused speaker, and I am here for it. Again, for those in the Mac, this speaker has the potential to be bright and even fatiguing. There is a subtle rise to the treble as you near 20 kHz, as seen in some of my near-field measurements. With the speakers at a proper listening distance, more or less pointed straight ahead, the treble doesn't roll off much, but it does simmer down enough that I did not find it fatiguing unless the source material was overly compressed or I was listening at extreme volumes. Between 50 and 70 dB, this is an insanely intelligible and detailed speaker, very similar to the B&W 805D4s. Now, the B&W's Diamond Tweeter handles extreme treble better than the 8's Silk Dome, maintaining its composure and never breaking apart or becoming overly sibilant the way the SourcePoint can when pushed. But then again, the B&W costs nearly 4 times as much, so it should outperform the 8. Those of you looking for a detail-oriented, airy speaker, one that excels at lower volumes, the 8 may be the speaker you've been waiting for. The 8's SOUNDSTAGE is truly holographic and a transparent window to the recorded event. These are some of the best imaging speakers I think you're going to find on the market right now, and the detail that is present between the speakers themselves is very, very good. Unlike some of Jones's previous designs, dynamically, the 8s are fun and even a little bit lively. While they need a sub to bring all of the scale and weight of an orchestra to life, these are incredibly responsive and even explosive speakers, which make them a lot of fun at all volumes, though I still recommend that you keep things below 90 dB, to avoid that harshness or fatigue. The LS50 Meta from KEF, it has a similar driver layout, though the Meta's smaller diameter drivers and more compact chassis means it doesn't quite have the same overall response as the SourcePoint 8. The Meta is more mild-mannered due to its slight roll-off up top, making it the more agnostic speaker when it comes to different genres of music. The Meta's compact and clean design is more room-friendly, and it is easier to set up, but if you're after a more, say, vintage look, or you just desire a bigger, more live sound, the SourcePoint 8 is ready and waiting. Now, the WHARFEDALE Linton is no doubt going to be cross-shopped against the SourcePoints. The Linton is the more full-range sounding speaker with a warmer, fuller sound compared to the 8s. Now, the Linton isn't as dynamically interesting, nor is it as extended up top, but all in all, it's still competitive. It's not that much larger than the SourcePoint, and it has a similar finish and build quality, only it does all this at a lower price. So definitely give it a listen if you haven't already. The JBL L82 Classic, another comparable speaker with an iconic vintage vibe that I absolutely love. While the SourcePoint 8 and the Lintons are better built with nicer finishes, the L82 doesn't sound as forward and, to me, has more low end in comparison. Similar to the WHARFEDALE, the JBL may be the better fit for more listeners with a wide variety of musical tastes. Last but not least, we have the KLH Model 3. This speaker hasn't been quite the hit the Model 5 was, and as a result, it's offered at quite a discount, currently retailing for $1,200 for the pair. Now, it's too big to be a true bookshelf, and the Model 3's more bulldog-like stance, never really jived with me. It's definitely more forward than the Model 5, but not quite as extended as the SourcePoint 8. Personally, I would rather have the SourcePoint 8 or the Model 5 if I was going with KLH, but for less than half the cost, the Model 3 is bound to get a decent look from those of you who might be on a tighter budget. I gotta say, I was surprised by Andrew Jones's SourcePoint 8 because, at least to me, it sounds nothing like his past designs, and I am actually really excited to see where he goes from here. Now, is it the best speaker under $3,000? No. But I still really enjoyed it, and once I got it set up correctly, I even loved it. It's a unique speaker, one that definitely has its strengths and weaknesses. In the hands of the right customer, it will no doubt amaze. So if you're on the market for a more neutral-leaning speaker with loads of detail that can be paired with modest gear and enjoyed at lower to moderate volumes, go ahead and add SourcePoint 8 to your audition list. All right, so that's enough out of me and my take on the SourcePoint 8s. What do you say?
I do think that what he's done here is quite a departure. At least, again, this is from my limited experience.
Sure.
I actually think the speaker is very interesting.
Yeah.
I love the design.
Okay.
I know that you were a bit iffy about it at first.
At first.
And I wasn't. Frankly, I thought it was really cool. Finally, something different.
Yeah, you loved it straight out of the box.
Yeah, straight out of the box. I personally find that it strikes a really nice balance between being a little bit vintage and modern.
Yeah.
But the front baffle, it's just so cool. Like what he did with the different edges and the contours, I think are fantastic. Mr. Jones, I love it. As for the sound,
okay,
I actually really enjoyed this speaker. I know just before I even sat down in the chair, you were like, I don't know what you think of it. And I was like, well, you're about to find out. And I really liked it, especially for music.
Yeah.
Now, about the setup.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm not really quite sure what was going down with the email we got from MOFI and the fact that the directions we received from the distributor were in complete opposition.
Somewhat. They do appear to be
the manual.
Yeah.
So I'd love to really be able to sit in the room and find out how that came about. But overall, I actually preferred these speakers when they were pointed towards our listening position. So
I knew it.
So I would say follow the manual and ignore the other, the last minute, the Monday morning quarterbacking
that the email was.
That MOFI is trying to do here.
Yeah.
And look, there's no way that didn't come about unless there were some reviews out there about the previous speaker.
Yeah.
People just finding it too bright or something. Now, to be clear, we have not heard the 10s. But yes, again, I definitely liked them with way more than a hint of toe-in, okay? Especially when watching movies or television series. Lastly, before we close this out, there's just a few speakers that you did not compare to that I think people may be asking about. So just really quickly.
All right.
2 from KLIPSCH.
Oh.
One is the HERESY 4.
Knew you were going to ask me about that, and I almost included it.
Well, thanks for leaving it for me. And then the 600 Mark IIs.
600M
Mark IIs.
Okay. Let's start with the HERESY 4s. Similar in price, I think. The HERESY 4s are a larger speaker. They are a 3-way design. This is a 2. The HERESY 4, very similar. Probably going to have a little bit more flexibility in terms of placement. I actually prefer the veneer and walnut finish of the HERESY 4 to the SourcePoint 8. Not saying that SourcePoint 8 is bad. I think the HERESY 4 is a bit more Eames chair walnut, whereas the SourcePoint goes not quite towards KLH Model 5 in that red. It's actually better than that. It's very similar to the Linton, and it might actually even be the same. Yeah, this one's interesting. The HERESY 4 is going to be even more sensitive or efficient, so even more dynamic. Believe it or not, at least in our measurements at our listening position, the HERESY 4 rolls off in the treble, so it's possible it will maybe feel less bright in comparison to the SourcePoint 8s. But other than that, I think the two could be cross-shopped very easily. I would still probably park my money with the Heresy 4s, but that's only because I have 2+ years of experience with them, and I know how to make them sing for me.
The 600Ms, real quick.
600Ms, I don't believe these two speakers will ever be cross-shopped. 600M Mark II is still a fabulous speaker. I absolutely love it in its price bracket. It's still a leader in my book. I think the SourcePoint 8 is better. I do. It's nicer finished. It's obviously bigger. It's also way more expensive. That said, I think there's actually a slightly less, I think there's a smaller chance of fatigue with 600M Mark IIs than there is with the SourcePoint 8.
Martin-Logan B100s.
I gotta say, I love the vibe, the look, the build quality, and everything of the SourcePoint. Nothing against Martin-Logan. What they've done with the new Motion XT series is beautiful, light years ahead of where it was. But I do really like Andrew Jones's design with the SourcePoint. I think it's really captivating. It's something different. A little bit apples to oranges, maybe.
There's a pretty big price
yeah,
difference as well.
Yeah, I'm going to have to say that for half the price, because I think they're about $1,300, $1,400 a pair, the B100s are a better value because you are probably going to get 90-95% of SourcePoint performance for half the money. I think the SourcePoints are still something special. I would probably buy SourcePoints if it was like, oh, it's your house, you're doing this, and you're going to live with it long term or maybe even forever. I would probably buy the SourcePoints over the B100s, but if I was on a limited budget, I would pick the B100s over, what was the other speaker? I'd pick them over the KLH Model 3s. And so, yeah, because those two are now similarly priced.
All right, we're done.
All right. So that's it, guys. That is now our review of the brand new SourcePoint 8 from Andrew Jones. What do you guys think? What do you guys think? This is his latest design. Where do you sit? You still more of his old stuff, or are you really excited about this new direction he's chosen to take? Sound off in the comments below. If you like this video, please do give it a thumbs up, like, and subscribe. Go ahead, ring that bell so that you're notified when new videos come out. If you use any of the links that Kristi left for you down below, know that that's a great way that you have continued to show your support for this channel and all of the work that we do here. And both of us, thank you all very, very much for doing that. Follow me on Instagram at Recovering Audiophile. That's it for us today. So remember, the only person who has to like the sound of your system is you. So happy listening, everybody. Thank you so much for watching. See you on the next video.